So, one of my earliest teenage obsessions was skincare. Instead of looking at toys in the kids section at the store, I was looking at moisturizers in the skincare section. As I grew up and navigated my sexuality, I saw that most of the beauty industry was aimed at feminine women, sometimes at masculine men, but everyone else was left out. It wasn't for someone like me. With Surf Labs, I wanted to create a fun skincare experience for everyone. I'm pretty sure your skin doesn't care how masc or femme you are or who you love, but I'm absolutely sure you need to take care of it. Check us out at surflabs.co, SERVELABS.co, and you can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at surflabs. Hello, welcome to He's Hot, but Something is Off. Woohoo! Okay, today we're going to talk about a topic that I can only talk to one person about that I know, which is my brother, and that's Formula One. But even if you don't know that much about Formula One, well, I'm going to talk about it anyways, but this is my podcast and I talk about whatever I want. I think I wanted to talk about this because Formula One is a type of motorsport, motor racing, cars racing around a track. And even as recently as like 6 or 7 years ago, especially in the US, Formula One was not a popular thing at all. Obviously, in the US, there are a lot of other types of motor racing that is a lot more popular. NASCAR, for example, IndyCar, things like that. Formula One traditionally has been more of a European type of motor racing, even though it's called the World Championship. You know, in soccer, they call it like the World Cup. In Formula One, it's called a World Championship. So every season, which is, a season occurs like basically the calendar year, more or less, they call it the World Championship because every time they have a race, it's almost always in a different country. And the countries are not just in Europe, even though a lot of the races do occur within Europe. But over the years, they branch out to be much more international. So there are races like in Australia, in Canada, in the US, various parts of Asia, in the Middle East, and obviously they still have a lot of the races in Europe. So I am kind of a Formula One fan, and I thought I would try today to talk a little bit about Formula One. It's something I don't usually talk about. Again, like the only person I talk about Formula One with is my brother, and we both like watch the races independently. He's up in Canada, and I'm down here in the US. But then a lot of the times after a race, we'll message each other and talk about some of the stuff that happened in the race. So I'm going to try to not get geeky about Formula One, because Formula One can get very, very geeky and technical. We are not about that on this podcast, okay? I'm going to talk about it from the sense of like the reasons why I find it entertaining, like aside from like some of the technical geeky stuff. And for those of you who might have watched Drive to Survive, which is a docuseries that covers Formula One, and I think they are about 6 or 7 seasons in. I think they're about to start season 7. There's at least 5 or 6 seasons of Drive to Survive. And with Drive to Survive, it's actually kind of brought Formula One to more into the mainstream. So obviously, yes, there are like races and cars, and there's like the technical and racing aspect of it. But Drive to Survive, it's really nice because it gives a lot of context to the competition of the sport. And it covers a lot of the things that happen outside of the racetrack. And also, it gives you a lot more insight into the actual people that are behind the teams and like the drivers themselves. So I think Drive to Survive is actually like, it's a really great watch. Even if you're not really into sports, you're not really into motorsports, you don't really know anything about Formula One, but the way Drive to Survive is produced, it's almost like the reality TV equivalent for Formula One, because you have all these like reality TV series about like almost anything imaginable. Like there must be so many different reality shows out there about everything. Like Selling Sunset. It's one of the very few shows I watch. And Selling Sunset is just, it follows a bunch of realtors, quote unquote realtors, trying to sell stuff. And it also gives you a look into like that kind of elite type of a lifestyle that some of these people live. And the same with Drive to Survive. It's, you don't need to know, like when you're watching Selling Sunset, you don't need to have really any interest in real estate. You don't need to know anything about real estate, but it's still entertaining. So it's kind of the same with Drive to Survive. It's, you don't need to know really anything about motorsports, but it's still an entertaining watch because, it's just like the way it's produced. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts on the upcoming 2025 Formula One season. And I'm going to talk about some of the drivers and some of the teams. So let's see how this goes. Okay, there are 24 races on the race calendar in 2025. Historically, it's been about 20-ish races, give or take. And again, every race takes place in a different country usually. There are some countries that host multiple races. Like the US, for example, hosts 3 races at different points on the calendar. So we've got Miami, we've got Austin, Texas, and we've got Las Vegas. So over the years, not every single year they go to the exact same places for each race, but most of the cities do make yearly appearances. So its season kicks off in Australia in March in just like a couple weeks' time. And then the season ends in Abu Dhabi in early December. So that's kind of sort of how they do it. So logistically, it's actually very complicated and interesting. Every team has to bring like a whole bunch of shit to every single race. So you have to bring the cars, you have to bring spare parts of the cars, you have to bring all of the tools that mechanics use. There's like a whole bunch of computer equipment, but there's like a lot of data and analytics that goes into it. There are motorhomes that the teams bring because there's like the garage and what they call like the pit wall where they are working on analytics and race control and stuff. But they also have like motorhomes and hospitality places, like a place for like when there isn't actively a race, like meeting spaces, all that kind of stuff. So there's like a lot of stuff that they bring. And at the start of, before every race weekend, they have to ship everything to wherever the race is. They have to build everything up. And then when the race is done on Sunday, they have to pack everything down and give everything to DHL. And DHL has to ship all of that stuff for 10 different teams. There are 20 drivers. Each team has 2 cars, so there's 10 teams. It's like that rolling circus type of a thing where like the moving circus, like the circus sets up for like 4 days somewhere, and then they have to pack this giant circus up into lots and lots of boxes or containers or whatever, and then they have to haul it to some other city. So the first one, for example, is in Australia, it's in Melbourne. The next weekend, they're in Shanghai. So between like Sunday in Melbourne and then like the next Wednesday or Thursday, just like a few days later, all this stuff has to be shipped from Australia to China. So that's like the logistics actually kind of crazy. And then they go to all these different places. So there's like Australia, China, Japan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the US, Italy, Monaco. It's everywhere. Let's talk about the teams themselves and some of the drivers. I think the drivers is maybe what's a little more interesting because I feel like even if you don't care that much about the sport, every sport has their personalities. So I'm going to run through not every single driver. We don't have time for that. I want to talk about some of the drivers. If you've seen Drive to Survive, you probably know something about these drivers already. If not, then I'm going to just give you like little descriptions of them. The first one we're going to talk about is Max Verstappen. Max, he is the reigning world champion. So every year during a season, there are 2 types of championships up for grabs. There's the Drivers' Championship. So whichever driver scores the most points will win the championship at the end of the year, end of the season. There's also the Constructors' Championship, which is the team championship, if you will. So whichever team between the two drivers that drive their two cars has the most points, they win the constructors or team championship. So the two championships up for grabs. Max Verstappen is the reigning drivers champion. So he won. He was the driver with the most points last year. And he has 4 drivers championship titles. So like the last 3 or 4 years, he's been like the top driver. Last year, a team called McLaren won the constructors championship. Max does not drive for McLaren. Max drives for Red Bull. So Red Bull, the energy drink, they actually invest a lot into sports. Formula One is a very expensive motorsport to get into. It's somewhat hard to get into Formula One and be like a winning team. Max, personality-wise, at least, I don't follow the drivers off of the track. I only follow Formula One as far as like the track action. I'm not so into Formula One and like these personalities that like I follow their Instagram and see what they're up to outside of driving. I only really care about driving. So I'm going to explain like the racing on-track driving personalities of some of these drivers that I find interesting. Like a lot of other top-tier championship-winning athletes, Max is ruthless. Basically, he will run you off the road. Like when you're like a regular driver on the road, you can't imagine anybody driving you off the road. When you're on a racetrack doing racing, like professional racing, it depends on the type of motorsport series you're talking about. Formula One is not like bumper cars. It's not like some other racing series where it's a little more acceptable to run someone off the track. It's quite frowned upon. There are rules in place. But Max is the type of driver that he's so ruthless, he's going to push the rule book right up to the very limit. And if he has to maybe take a few penalty points to run you off the track so that he can score more points, he will and have done that. Whether you agree with that type of driving or not, this is like competitive top tier. A lot of people call Formula One the pinnacle of motorsport. This is like a very high tier professional motorsport series, Formula One. This is not like your Sunday drive to church, I think the people that are like really Formula One fans that just love to see racing, they can understand and respect someone that knows exactly where the limit is in terms of like the rules and regulations and then pushes it right up to that limit. But a lot of Formula One is about stretching the limit in terms of driving, in terms of like the engineering, in terms of like finding loopholes in the regulations that are like technically legal, but like you're trying to push everything to the absolute nth degree possible to get the absolute fastest, best driving car to score the most points so that you can win a championship. Formula One really is a sport about pushing limits and kind of exploiting the maximum of everything you can exploit. That's just the nature of the sport, really. So Max, in that respect, he pushes maybe the hardest out of all the 20 drivers that are on the grid. If another driver is battling Max on track, he's got a reputation for not yielding. Obviously, when you think about racing driving, right, it's like no one wants to be overtaken. Everyone wants to go the fastest. But even amongst these 20 drivers at the so-called pinnacle of motorsports, there are drivers that are known to be more ruthless than others. Max is pretty much known for being the most ruthless. It's like the person you least want to try to overtake on the track because he's shown that he probably doesn't give a fuck about you. And if he wants to run you off the track, he will run you off the track. And he has the penalty points to show for it. So there you go. That is Max. He's Dutch, by the way, if you care. He's Dutch. Driving for Red Bull. So that's the Red Bull team. And other driver I want to talk about is Fernando Alonso. I feel like Fernando Alonso, you might have heard. Fernando Alonso and also Lewis Hamilton are probably some of the names you might have heard of. For example, Fernando Alonso was for like a split second semi-linked to Taylor Swift as someone that, they may have dated at some small insignificant point in time. So that's why some of you may have heard of Fernando Alonso. He's Spanish. He's the oldest driver on the grid. I think is he 40 now? In Formula One, when you're in like your mid-30s, that's considered old. That's starting to get to the point where like, okay, people in Formula One drivers in Formula One that are getting into like deep into the 30s, they think like, oh, when is this person going to retire? For a rookie coming into Formula One as a driver, if you're mid-20s, that's like old to be getting into Formula One. A lot of rookies that are coming to Formula One for the first time, they're like 18, 19, 20, 21, maybe 22. Like they're like late teens, early 20s. That's kind of sort of like the expected age for like a new driver coming into Formula One for the first time. So Fernando Alonso, he had a stint in Formula One. He left Formula One and then he came back 2-3 years ago. So he retired and then he came out of retirement to come back into Formula One. And he's like 40-ish. I don't know exactly. He's around 40 now. And he's the oldest driver on the grid. Fernando Alonso is still a very good driver. There's some drivers on here that are like, relative to the others, it is a competitive sport. So you're going to be judged against your peers. Fernando Alonso is still a very good driver. He's a very intelligent driver. He's very like strategic with his driving, which is not like a dirty thing. Like you have to be strategic. You know, we talk about like people on Drag Race and people voting with strategy, right? And it's like RuPaul's Drag Race, not Motorsports Drag Race. And talk about drag queens being strategic, how that's bad. But like, no, here, like when you're driving in motorsports competitively, being strategic is a good thing. Okay, it's not a shady thing. So Fernando Alonso, you might have heard of him just because, you know, the Taylor Swift, I don't know whatever you call it, hoopla, if you will. Lewis Hamilton is, at least in Europe, and especially in the UK, is a household name. Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time World Drivers' Championship. So I talk about Max. He's the reigning world champion, drivers champion, and he's won the drivers championship 4 times. Lewis Hamilton has done it for 7 times. However, the last few years when Max was winning all the championships, you know, Lewis has it because only one driver can get to the top, and only the top driver with the most points each season wins the drivers world championship. Partially because the car he was given is not the fastest, but Lewis Hamilton is a household name in the UK. He's like a national hero in the UK, but he's British. And the big news with Lewis Hamilton, like there's not any big news with Max this year. There's not any big news with Fernando. The big news with Lewis Hamilton this year is that he's moving to Ferrari. So let's talk about Ferrari. Ferrari in Formula One is not just a team, it's a religion. Okay? When I was younger, back in Vancouver, our neighbor, John was his name. I didn't know that he was Italian when we first met him, but he was like super nice. I remember when we first moved to Canada and had the house, once in a while he would help us out with some of the chores around the yard because we didn't know how to do it. And like he would, I think one time he helped us like mow our lawn or like shovel our snow or something like that. Super, super sweet neighbor. I didn't know he was Italian until a giant Ferrari flag hanging outside the front of his house. That was many, many years ago before I knew what Formula One or what Ferrari is. Ferrari in Italy is not just a company. It's not just an automaker. They're not just a race team. It's a effing religion. But Ferrari is also has that cult status within Formula One. Even if you are not Italian, even if you're not European. Ferrari is just like... can you imagine, take any other sport that you might be familiar with. There's probably like some team in one of the other sports you might follow where like, that is like an iconic team within that sport. And that sport would be very different if that one team was not in that sport or ceased to exist. That's Ferrari and Formula One. Like, it'd be almost like RuPaul's Drag Race without RuPaul. Maybe a little bit like that. Yeah, so... the big news is Lewis Hamilton, starting this year, 2025, is moving to drive for Ferrari. He was driving for Mercedes before, and that's where he won all his championships with Mercedes. They were very successful together. So Ferrari is like the most iconic team in the sport. And then you have Lewis Hamilton, who is like the most successful person in that sport. It's like, you know, on paper, it's like the perfect pairing. However, Lewis Hamilton is not necessarily at the top of his game anymore. He's been beaten by Max the last few years. Partially it's because the Mercedes car he has been driving the last few years was not the fastest car. You know, when you don't have the fastest car, it's hard to get the most points and win the most races than to, you know, get that driver's championship. But he's also a little bit more advanced in his age. He's in his late 30s now. like I said, when you approach like your mid 30s, people are like, okay, when are you going to retire? You're getting kind of old. And there's a little bit of talk of like, does Lewis Hamilton still have it, or is he past his peak? That's a question that I feel like a lot of athletes get questioned with, as when they've had like a very long career, right? The longer your career goes, the more eventually they're thinking like, oh, this person's been in sport for like 10 years. That's most people are not in the sport for 10 years. Like, do they still have it? Are they getting too old? Blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So there's there's a big question mark over, is he going to flop when he goes to Ferrari? Because history might be repeating itself. Because several years ago, there was another driver that had won multiple championships called Sebastian Vettel. You may or may not have heard of that name, but Sebastian Vettel won multiple world championships, just like Max did and just like Lewis Hamilton did. Not quite as much as Lewis, but to win one driver's world championship is something that most Formula 1 drivers will not be able to achieve. But it's only one person can get to the top. And most Formula 1 drivers, they don't even win multiple races. But to win so much that you win one driver's championship, that is like you are better than most other Formula 1 drivers. And to be a driver that wins multiple world championships across multiple years, that is a very, very small number of drivers. There's only like, I don't know the stat, but there's probably only been like 15 or 20 drivers, maybe not even that much, across the whole history of Formula 1 that has ever won multiple world championships, something like that. I've never done that count. And there has been like hundreds of people that have driven in Formula 1. It's very hard. But Sebastian Vettel, just after he had won all these multiple world championships as a driver, he moved to Ferrari, and then he wasn't very good at Ferrari. It just didn't click. For whatever reason, it just wasn't a good pairing, and then he just kind of retired. He was at Ferrari for like, 2-3 years, something like that, and wasn't winning. He was spinning out a lot. He didn't do well at Ferrari. So for me, Lewis Hamilton, one of the most iconic drivers right now in Formula 1, moving to undoubtedly the most iconic team in Formula 1, which is Ferrari. On paper, you might think that's a match made in heaven. I hope this is not another Sebastian Vettel repeat where Lewis Hamilton moves to Ferrari and then doesn't really, he's past his peak, or he doesn't drive a Ferrari in whatever way, shape, or form, and then he doesn't really win that much. And it's like, okay, well, this is just where you're going to retire. Most of you probably have a facial cleanser and moisturizer already, so I want to tell you about Shield and Slay DP, which is an anti-pollution hydration spray I formulated specifically for my skincare line, Serve Labs. This is actually a product I've been looking for years now and haven't been able to find on the market, which is something that was a hydration spray but also has anti-pollution, antioxidant properties for your skin. Shield and Slay DP is the ultimate double protection defense for your skin, teaming up antioxidants, probiotics, along with hydrating ingredients to fend off environmental stressors and aggressors. You can use it as part of your daily skincare routine, but I've also designed it so you can use it while you're out and about, on an airplane, or whenever your skin feels dry, dull, or a bit worse for wear. All you have to do is spray it on. Check out Shield and Slay DP along with the rest of the Serve Labs skincare lineup at servelabs.co, servelabs.co, and you can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at servelabs. Okay, we're not talking about every driver, but I want to talk about just a couple more. Some of these are like kind of funny. There's a rookie called Jack Doohan. He was like a substitute backup driver last year, and he did like one race last year to sub in for someone else. But he got a full drive. He is not a backup reserve driver. He's one of the main drivers now for a team called Alpine. And Alpine is part of the Renault group. Renault is a major car brand over in Europe. They used to sell cars in the US in like the 80s, I think. But none of the French brands worked out that well in the US when they tried to sell cars over here. And the thing is, they basically hired Jack Doohan over the winter break between the last season and the start of this season, which is coming in March. And then shortly after that, Alpine made an announcement that some other person, another young rookie up-and-coming driver called Franco Colapinto, has been hired as a reserve driver. And you're thinking, well, if Jack was a reserve driver, he got promoted to be one of the main drivers, they have to backfill for him, right? What's the problem there? The thing is, Alpine already has like 2 other substitute drivers before announcing Colapinto. Colapinto is also another rookie. He subbed in for a different team for a few races last year, and he was pretty good. The thing is, he looks to be a promising talent, Colapinto. And you don't put someone like that into a reserve backup substitute driver role on a 3-year contract if you were not thinking about promoting him to be a main driver. But there's no rookie trying to make it into Formula One wants to sign a multi-year commitment just to be a backup driver. And basically, this reflects on Jack because Jack's like looking over his shoulder and he's like, am I about to be kicked out? And, this rookie is trying to get a seat, basically. Alpine won't say it, but that's effectively what's happening because there's no one's buying it that they're getting Colapinto into the reserve spot just to keep him actually as a reserve for 3 years. So imagine you get promoted to be like the top position in your department. And then out of nowhere, your boss hires someone from like some other company to backfill you who's like younger and prettier and sexier than you. And then now all the pressure is on you to not have your job eliminated because this younger, sexier person is like, you got to watch your back. You know what I mean? Some of this drama I find very, very funny. But that's just to give you a little bit of a flavor of like, I find some parts of Formula One entertaining outside of the racetrack. Just like in Drive to Survive, you see a lot of the people, the drivers, the personalities, and how they behave and how entertaining that is outside of the actual racing on the track when the race is actually on. Just stuff like this is one example of like, some of the drama and stories surrounding Formula One that I find kind of entertaining. That one story is that one's a good one, actually. And Formula One, we're going to wrap this up. My final thing about Formula One that I find interesting is a lot of the times for a lot of sports, people just get the updates on the scores. Like basketball, I think is quite common, where people will keep tabs on the score on a game that's going on because they can't watch it or they're driving or whatever it is. And then that's good enough for them. Formula One, at least the way I watch it, is the finishing order or like the score is just one aspect of the game or like the race. When I'm watching Formula One, I need to have undivided, continuous attention when I'm watching it. Based on 2 things. The cars are going around so fast, it only takes like a split second for something to happen, like a crash or like someone going off or someone having a super slow pit stop or for some sort of incident to happen. It's kind of sort of like when you go to a movie theater to watch a movie, like you basically can't move because the cars are going on so fast, it only takes like a split second for some incident to happen. And if you're not watching the screen for like that second, you would have missed it. Obviously, they have replays and stuff. But the other thing is, when you're watching basketball, the court is only so big and the ball is only in one place. Same as with hockey, right? Even baseball, the ball is only in one place. Someone might be like stealing a base, so there might be like a couple of places on the baseball field to be looking at. Sure, that's not that hard. When you have 20 cars on this giant racetrack that's like several miles long, there's action potentially happening all over the entire length of the racetrack. And it's not like an oval like in NASCAR. It's not just like circle. They're like twists and turns and everything like that. And the track is so long that you can't really keep an eye on every single part of the track. So you're relying on the TV coverage to follow certain cars, right? But when you have 20 cars on the racetrack, you get different battles between different cars that can be going on simultaneously. So maybe like first and second place, they're battling each other. But maybe 8th and 9th place, they're also battling each other. And all the other cars are trying to battle each other. So you got 20 cars with all these battles all over the racetrack, and they're all moving at 80 miles an hour, 100 something miles an hour, up to like 200 miles an hour, like down the racetrack. There's so much action potentially happening all across the racetrack in different battles. And they are all moving along the racetrack so quickly. And you also have people that go into the coming in and out of the pits every so often that it takes so much attention to watch Formula One. At least for me anyway. So I don't watch the Formula One races live. A lot of Formula One fans, they only want to watch it live because as they're watching it, they'll like talk to their friends or they'll be checking social media to like be in on a conversation about things that are happening as they're happening in real time. But like I said before, these races occur in all sorts of different countries. So the time zone gets to be like really difficult. Most races tend to be in like the mid-afternoon. It might start at like 3 or 4 p.m. local time. They're going to like Australia, then they're going to like the US, then they're going to Asia, then they're going to Europe. Like the time zones are everywhere. They're really dedicated Formula One fans that want to watch as many of the races as possible live in real time. They have to be watching it at all sorts of weird hours as the races travel to different countries throughout the calendar year, which is like crazy to me. So what I do is I download the races when it's convenient for me. Races usually happen on Sunday, so maybe like Monday or Tuesday, that's where like I'll download the race when I have time. And I don't follow anything on my social media that might give away any of the action or news or the results of the race. Because again, like with basketball, baby, it's fine for a lot of people to just know who won at the end, what the final score is. But with Formula One, the score, again, is only one part of it. It's like Formula One fans watch Formula One, if they were to watch the race, for the drama that happens on the racetrack. It's like when Max Verstappen runs someone off the road, I want to see that because that is drama, that's action. It's like when you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, you don't want to just know who won at the end. You want to know what the challenge was. Like, you know, the queens that fell flat on their face, or like the people who were not funny in Snatch Game, totally flopped up the character. It's the same as with Formula One. The fun in watching Formula One, if you want to watch the race, is in the action on the racetrack itself. It's not just about, okay, this person came in first and this person came in second, this person came in third. Yes, the results matter, but like how they got to that result and all the juicy drama that happens on track, that is like a key part of why people watch Formula One, the people that are into it. But it's one of those things where like when I'm watching Formula One, I sometimes have to be in the right mood to watch Formula One because it takes so much intense focus and attention. Because I literally have to be watching every single second of the race as the race is going because I don't want to miss anything. It's a little hard to explain without getting more technical. So I download it, and by download it, I also have the ability to pause it. So if I need to like grab some water or grab a snack or like go to the bathroom, I just pause it. I come back and then I can like continue watching it. That's the level of attention I need to pay to it. And there are times where, okay, a race just happened, I have it downloaded, and it's like, you know what? Right now, I just don't have the energy level to watch an hour and a half or 2 hours of something continuously. Because it does take quite a bit of, for me to really get into it, I do require a certain energy and attention level, which if I've had like a long day and it's like the end of the day, it's like, okay, I just don't have the energy to watch Formula One because there's so much action and there's like data, and you could also hear like the radio calls between the driver and their teams because they broadcast some of the radio. There's a lot that to analyze during a race. It's not just like who's got the ball and who's gonna shoot a 3-pointer. I don't understand basketball, so maybe I'm not comparing it properly. But like, there's so many aspects to Formula One that as a fan to like kind of watch it properly to that level, it takes quite a bit of attention. Okay, that's just scratching a little bit of the surface of what I enjoy about Formula One and my takes on some of the drivers and some of the teams and some of the drama that I find entertaining without getting into like the technical stuff. You can get really technical with Formula One. It is a very technical sport with a lot of engineering in it. Yeah, but I'll leave it at that. I don't think this is going to be a very popular podcast, but I'm looking at my recorder right here, and I've been talking about Formula One for 45 minutes now, and I don't think any of you signed up for me to talk about Formula One for 45 minutes. Normal service will be resumed next week. Maybe I'll talk about more gay stuff next week. That's not Formula One. None of the drivers on the Formula One grid are gay, by the way. Not that we know anyways. However, Lewis Hamilton has been, and I think still is, a vocal, avid supporter of the queer community. Just so you know, Lewis Hamilton actually does a lot of like advocacy and like charity work as well. He's kind of sort of known for that. Yeah, and he's been a vocal supporter of the LGBTQI community. There you go. All right, come back next week when I won't talk about sports and I won't talk about Formula One, and I'll talk about cocks and ass and dick. All right, bye y'all.